Okay. I think we'll wait another few minutes to see Rabbi Keeman from Liverpool. Rabbi Keeman's doing it, yeah.
Oh, here we are. That should solve that problem. Oh, good evening.
Hello.
Hello, Ian.
Hello. I thought the other night when you had Lord Wolfson, I thought that was brilliant.
It was a very good evening. He's a very personable man.
There's no side to him, is there? There's no pomposity.
None at all.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
Object lesson. Yeah.
Did you hear him today he spoke in the House of Lords?
I tried to find it, I couldn't find it. That's my thought, that is.
I wonder if there was a replay. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, and I think Gary did very well also.
David, hello.
He did. Hello. Hi, David.
Hi, guys.
Hello, Ridas.
Hello, hello.
Who is Mike? Who's Mike? He's gone off.
Good evening.
Hello. We're going to give it another minute. Oh, here's Mike. Then we're going to get started. Hi, Ashley. Okay. Should we get started? A time is a time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening.
Tonight we're sharing our program together with Chai Network Chabad of Cheadle. Anyone know where Cheadle is? Which part of the globe?
It's what the floods are.
Where the floods are.
Don't mention. Shh.
So we're joining together with my friend Rabbi Chaim from South Manchester, and we're going to have a little Farbrengen here together tonight. Despite everything that's going on, nothing is going to stop Jewish people getting together somehow or another, by hook or by, well, not by crook, but somehow we're going to get together and we're going to say L'chaim together and celebrate those events that need to be celebrated and commemorated. So this Shabbos is going to be the 10th of Shvat, which is the yard site in 1950 of the passing of the previous Lubavitch Rebbe. And then a year later, on the 10th of Shvat, as we'll soon see later this evening, on the 10th of Shvat, it's also the day when a year later, which is 70 years this year, when the Rebbe officially accepted upon himself the mantle of leadership of Chabad and of Lubavitch and of the Jewish nation. Now we know from the Chumash, which we just read recently a few weeks ago, that for 80 years, God observed Moshe Rabbeinu. He watched and he waited until that fateful day. Moshe Rabbeinu was now a shepherd, caring for hundreds of sheep of his father-in-law. And one day, a little lamb fled the flock, running off into the wilderness. So we know all of the story. Moshe Rabbeinu pursued. One second here. Moshe Rabbeinu pursued this stray lamb. The Medrash says it was for 3 days. It wasn't an afternoon. For 3 days, he went and he brought back this stray lamb to the flock. And it was at that moment when Moshe was proven to care not only for the grand flock, but also for the shy individual flock, sheep, that God had found the leader that he was seeking for his children. So as we mark 71 years of the Rebbe's leadership, this anecdote is fondly recalled. Because like the first leader of the Jewish people, the first Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu, our Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation, we commemorate this weekend his leadership. He educated us with his original Torah insights. He nurtured us with his love and his incredible empathy. He united us into a mighty army by treating us as a flock, and he empowered us as individuals by seeing each of us with our own merits. So tonight we're going to experience every one of these leadership qualities. We're going to watch a few minutes of the Rebbe expounding original Torah thought, conduct a mass public gathering of Farbrengen, meet individuals face to face, and we will hear from those whose lives were completely transformed by the Rebbe.
How is a Rebbe chosen?
How was he chosen?
How is a Rebbe chosen?
That's a very good question. I think it's each case, it's individual. In some cases, it was immediate. In some cases, it took a while. Some cases they accepted it immediately. In the Rebbe's case, it took a year when he didn't want to accept it.
When you say they, who is they?
The Hasidim.
They decide en masse, or they have a court.
There was no meeting. It was no meeting. It was something that the people. It came from the people, and they felt it on them by themselves, and they approached him individually and as groups.
Right.
Maybe we'll touch on that later. How the history of it, how it worked, how it went in this particular instance. Other times it was the only child, and he took over, depending where and how. Particularly in Chabad, each case was slightly different.
Thank you.
We're going to focus on some of the great principles that guided the Rebbe and continue to be the guiding principles of Chabad as we enter the third decade of the 21st century. But before we begin, it must be said that the Rebbe would want us to make the following proclamation: that the success of a Jewish leader can only be measured by how many leaders are created by his or her leadership. And as we explore the life and teachings of a true shepherd of Israel, we should open our hearts and minds to be inspired to the realization that we are meant to be shepherds as well in our own right and in our own lives. But before we do that, we should say L'chaim because it's a Farbrengen. So let's have a little L'chaim and then we'll get started. And again, we welcome all of our friends and visitors joining us from Cheadle with Rabbi Chaim. And who do we have here? Irvin and Phil and Mike. L'chaim, everyone.
Fine.
Fine.
Rabbi Chaim, you're on silent. You're on mute.
We got to do that again. L'chaim, everyone. L'chaim.
Fine.
Okay. In the course of the Rebbe's leadership, the Rebbe held more than 1,000 Farbrengens, but none was more memorable than the first one. It was a Wednesday night on the 17th of January, 1951, the 10th of Shvat. And people who were there described the electricity in the room. It was a small room, as you'll soon see. It was the first yard site of the previous Rebbe, and the air was thick with anticipation that the Rebbe would hopefully, finally accept the role of Rebbe and of leader after a year of resistance. And the Rebbe didn't disappoint. He delivered his first official mimer, which is a Hasidic discourse explaining some of the most elusive points of Kabbalah and Hasidus, weeping his way through much of it. He was only 47 years old at the time. He spoke with unrestrained emotion about his predecessor and the urgency of carrying on the vision and the directives of the previous Rebbe. It was a powerful and historic night. But it was a moment that night that was both humorous and poignant that captured the imagination of the crowd. With a smile, the Rebbe announced that in America, every promotion, every event demands a statement, and preferably a statement with shock value. So in keeping with local custom, the Rebbe says, I'm going to make a statement. And that statement was towards the beginning of the Farbrengen, and it actually framed the whole Farbrengen. And after that, it changed the whole Jewish world. I'm not going to tell you now exactly what that statement was. In a few minutes, we'll see the video, and you'll hear the Rebbe tell us that statement himself. But suffice it to say that the Rebbe's statement revolutionized, yes, revolutionized, raised the bar, changed the bar. There is no other way to put it, of the idea of Ahavat Yisrael, of the mutual love between all the Jewish people. The Torah commands the Jewish people to have special love for their fellow Jews, but what does that mean? It's a pasuk verse in the Torah, V'ahavta l'reach ha'kamocha. But what does that mean? What is this love? How important is it to feel it, and what role does it play in Jewish religious life? So in this video, we're going to hear a variety of people talking to us about the love for the fellow Jew, what it means to them, and how they were inspired by the Rebbe to have it. And then we're going to join the Rebbe in that historic Farbrengen of 1951 and hear that statement that changed forever the way Jewish people feel about each other. Let's listen with our ears, but let's listen as well with our neshama. I'm going to put it up here. Okay, let's see. Can you see it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Ahavat Yisrael means to me just believing in the unique potential in every individual, and specifically the divine potential in each and every Jew.
Ahavat Yisrael is the love and acceptance of every Jewish soul, regardless of their background, religious observance, level of education.
Every Jewish neshama is precious. We all have a piece of God inside of us, so we never give up on Jewish people. We're all part of a big family. I once heard the story once someone asking the Rebbe if he ever gets tired of just handing out bills to thousands of Jews every single day. And his answer was, I'm going to get tired just looking at diamonds.
The Rebbe inspired a generation of Jews to see the greatness in every Jew. His literal translation of the concept of loving one's fellow Jew was his very life. In fact, the Rebbe made Ahavat Yisrael the bedrock of his leadership.
The Rebbe, for me, has actively proven that there are people willing to share love in order to grow an infinite boundary of unity or solidarity. And the way that you create the infinite boundary is by not judging everybody else.
Throughout his leadership, the Rebbe modeled love of a fellow Jew, and it was infectious. The Rebbe focused on it during his inauguration. In fact, it was his very mission statement.
Ist dort damals der Wort, was der Rebbe hat übergesagt in dem Namen von dem alten Rebben, als wahrhafte Lerejacho Komecho is a Kehle, a wahrhafte es Hawaii Lekecho, I bemeile ist basei derselber Seder. A beschaß me legt dem Dogisch a wahrhafte Lerejacho Komecho, I das basei nicht nur nicht kinstiri zu a wahrhafte es Hawaii Lekecho, nur verkehrt, dass noch a Kehle durch den Ruf hat man a tieferen Verbund mit wahrhafte es Hawaii Lekecho. I da in Amerika is a allemal a Seder, a deste Sache will hören a Statement. Und das Statement, da darf sein, etwas mit a Chidush dover, mit a Inni, was im Mavel es erreihen. I bemeile das, ich weiß nicht, das darf Mavel sein es erreihen, aber ich will hören a Statement, hat der Rebbe gesagt, dass da 3 Sachen. Als da Avas is Hashem, und so da Avas Ater, und so da Avas Yisroel. Und hat die alle 3 Sachen sein in Kule Chad. Das ist, man kann nicht voneinander teilen. Zwischen einer haben wir der Zweite. Und am handelt, wie bald das ist Kule Chad, und das ist auch Kule Chad, wie ein Netz im Seins. Das ist, aber ist dämmelt, ist dort der Klall, als ein Ingen Atzmi. Wenn man halt so schon und ein Teil davon ist, hat dämmelt, hat der Tefis Kule, also bringt ab Sidis Beshem Baal Shem Tov bringt es ab Beshem Rishenim. Also etzem kishat Tefis b'Miktsose hat Tefis b'Kule. Und wie bald das hat die alle 3 Sachen seinen Kule Chad, ist in was für Achilek mit Ton Chappen, darf man wissen sein, am Chapton alle 3 Sachen. Bei Mele dürfen alle wissen, aber Schaß Machab Zochon Onavas Hashem, ist das nicht eine Sache, was man kann damit jetzt sein, und man kann sich damit halten, eben mit Tom Mavas Atere und eben mit Tom Mavas Yisroel.
If you're going to unlock your potential and be your very best, you're going to have somebody see you like that and inspire you and encourage you to do that. The Rebbe to me is like the ultimate coach. It's the closest thing we have in this life for having somebody seeing you from God's perspective.
From that small room in Brooklyn, the Rebbe's vision was manifest over the years that followed, in the millions of people that he taught and touched. It is, perhaps, the greatest mark he left on each and every one of us.
We've all seen videos of the Rebbe speaking. We see it every Thursday night. What do you see different? What caught your attention that was different on that little clip? It wasn't a video, it was a picture. What caught you different? What seemed different over there?
Well, the way everybody was dressed.
Maybe some more L'chaim. Yes, sorry?
Everybody was dressed in ordinary hats, whereas now they're big black hats and black attire. And there were so many people when the Rebbe talks, there was just a handful then.
Exactly. It's a small room. That small room is still there in 770. It was a small room, and it was a very small crowd, with a very young Rebbe. Lubavitch in America then was very, very small. And you think of the size of Chabad today, there's more Chabad Shluchim today than there were Chabad Chassidim in America then. But more importantly, what did you find? The Rebbe said that people want to have a statement and it should sound shocking. Were you shocked by the statement? Did it have any shock power to it? What did you find unusual or interesting about that statement?
Sorry.
I can play it over again. The Rebbe is telling us.
Maybe repeat the statement.
Is he requiring us to love people we might not even like?
That's true. That's Avas Yisrael. But the Rebbe is telling us that the three loves, the love of God, the love of Torah, and the love of the Jewish people, are inextricably linked to each other, and you cannot have one without the other. That was revolutionary. In fact, in some circles, in some quarters today, it's also revolutionary. Because to many, Judaism is about diving into the books and learning. And he's saying that to others it's prayer. And the Rebbe is saying that the key hinge upon which everything turns on and everything stands on is the love of the fellow Jew. And when one's love of a fellow Jew is enhanced, then one's Torah study and one's relationship with God is enhanced. That was the revolutionary message that the Rebbe was telling us then. And if you think about it, it's still revolutionary today because there is a belief by many that Judaism is all about Torah study, which of course it is. But he's saying there is that it's actually a triple hinged, it evolves around each other. These are three things which are inextricably linked and cannot be separated. We can't pick and choose serving God and studying his Torah at the expense or at the neglect of our fellow Jew.
Was that his original thought, or are the Talmudic references to that, to the three things?
The three things I mentioned earlier, as he said. My father-in-law mentioned it from the Zohar, but it was his original highlight of it. And he made that the theme. That was the theme of that Farbrengen, which was the first inaugural Farbrengen in his leadership, and that was his theme for the next generation, so to speak. And that's what carries us on to this day. So it wasn't just quoting a passage from the Talmud or the Zohar. It is actually developing it and living it, as we'll soon see. Because the next question is, how do we make this mission statement work? What are the dynamics of this mission statement? He told us what to do. We got to prioritize Avas Yisrael. But how are we meant to do it? To love every Jew is a lovely sentiment, but is it in fact really doable? It seems a bit fantastic, as David said, someone who you don't like, it's difficult to love him. How do we do that? We know that human relations is a very difficult thing. It's a big challenge, human relations. And people can be challenging, people can be disappointing, and yet somehow the Rebbe didn't just say that it's a good idea, he made it happen. So what's the secret? The secret lies in the way that the Rebbe looked at his fellow Jew and the way the Rebbe taught others to do the same. The Rebbe taught again and again that vision is subjective, that you can see what you want to see. Critical eyes will always see criticism. Kindly eyes will see beauty. Kindly and wise eyes will see hidden beauty. So therefore, the Rebbe tells us, choose your eyes carefully. Decide what you're looking for, and with enough effort, you will always find it. Building on the wisdom of generations of Hasidic teachings, the Rebbe taught us about each other. He spoke about the gems of humanity buried in every heart and the spark of godliness that there is in every soul. And while he intrigued us with his talks of the preciousness of every individual, it was the way he lived every word that he spoke that captured our hearts. The only thing more amazing than what the Rebbe preached about unconditional love was how the Rebbe practiced unconditional love. He didn't only remind us to open our eyes to each other, he helped us develop the kind of eyes that see good in each other. So by changing what your eyes see when they see another Jew, you can begin to see the truth of God and Torah simply by looking at the person next to you. The slight adjustment provided by a Farbrengen of the Rebbe, a whole new person appears in front of us. A whole new picture comes into focus. A whole new world of goodness and beauty unfolds in front of our eyes. So when we're going to play this next video, see if you can identify the Rebbe's unique take on people, both from hearing the testimony of people whom the Rebbe trained and from hearing the Rebbe speak about it directly. See if you can pick up the nuanced way in which the Rebbe beheld his fellow Jews. And then you decide if you would enjoy being seen in this light. And then decide if you can see yourself looking at people in this way. So let's get up the next one, the next piece here. But meanwhile, Rabbi Chaim, we should say l'chaim. You know, it's a Farbrengen after all. For those who came in a bit later, we're joining tonight with our friends in Cheadle in South Manchester with Rabbi Chaim. We welcome them all.
I think everybody should say l'chaim. Warm yourselves up. And really, Rabbi Kivan and myself are in New York at the moment. It seems like we're in Liverpool and in Cheadle. But l'chaim, everybody.
L'chaim.
Okay. So now I'm going to bring up this next piece here. L'chaim. Here we go.
Every Jew has a soul that is precious. The Rebbe did not preach blind love. His eyes were open to see the beauty in every Jew and helped so many others to see just how precious each one is and how powerful. In public talks, personal encounters, and in his conduct, the Rebbe emphasized this reality. Mr. Louis Goldstein is a businessman from Sydney, Australia. In 1989, along with his wife and son, he had an audience with the Rebbe.
I had never seen Yechidus before, so the whole thing was quite fascinating. And there were about 200 people there the first time we went. And the Rebbe spoke to us first, he gave a sikha, and after that, then it started, you went one by one. There was no order, you could go at any time, line up and just wait your turn and speak to the Rebbe. But we were quite fascinated by the whole thing, so we watched everyone else's Yechidus, and the Australians went last. And I was actually standing in front of the Rebbe, maybe 10 meters away, and just couldn't hear a word, but I was watching the whole thing, and it was just the most amazing thing just to watch Yechidus, to watch the Rebbe in action. And my wife and I were holding our son Zalman, and he was, I think, maybe a year old. So we had Yechidus with the Rebbe. So I asked the Rebbe for a bracha for my brother.
I'd like to ask just one bracha for my brother, who has absolutely no shaykhs to Yiddishkeit at all. His name is Meir ben Eta. Absolutely no shaykhs at all to Yiddishkeit.
He was born a Jew. That means he's not only shaykhs to Yiddishkeit. He is a Jew, and that is his essence. You must only reveal it by removing the dirt or the shame that is covering it up. And that depends on his relatives, and especially brother or sister, or sister-in-law. That means Jewish status.
So I got a lesson in Chabad Hasidus 101 from the Rebbe. 101, one-on-one from the Rebbe directly. So, and that, I realized that encapsulated the entire philosophy of Chabad in a nutshell, in one sentence, where when you look at another Yid, the fact that they're born Jewish, that's all that counts. And some people need polishing, some people don't. We all probably need a bit of polishing, and that's what the Rebbe was telling me. And it was a very powerful point.
Verjidene sich jedu, wo der Baal wurde gesagt, dem Wort von dem Baal Shemte. Kisiya atem eretz chefetz, a Jiden und jeder Ried befragt, wird geglichen zu eretz chefetz zu Ort. Was eretz, sie wird angerufen eretz chefetz. Was wird angerufen eretz chefetz? Der Fall, was innewenig kriegen, a wohn im Tevis und Margolies, sie liegt am Mai im Chai. Sie liegen kamo Eitzet, was sie seine Gonus bemavi ho Adomo. Der Unterschied nur, sie da bei ihnen, was sie gefühlen sich Korev. Zu dem Eberflach, bemehle darf ein bisschen agrobton. Gefühlt mir gleich dem Even Tevo, gefühlt gleich dem Mayim Chayim. Sie da a Sehne, was mir darf groben tiefer und noch tiefer, kdei arobzunehmen mit alle Unionen, hamalimim und mastirim.
Mr. George Rohr is a businessman and philanthropist based in New York City. In 1991, he helped found a beginner's prayer service for the high holidays at his synagogue, KAJ, in Manhattan.
When I moved to New York and got married, I started a beginner's minyan at our shul here in Manhattan. It was basically an introductory service for Jewish adults that may or may not have had the benefit of a Jewish education. And I was leading it with not a great deal of preparation, but nevertheless I did my best to lead it. And it turned out to have been a success. I remember, as I always did every year, going to visit the Rebbe for Lekach between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I thought to myself, this year I'm going to be different. I'm going to give the Rebbe some nachas. I'm going to give him some good news and make him happy and proud and smile and especially make him proud of me.
I'd like to let the Rebbe know, I hope he has some nachas from the following. This Rosh Hashanah in our shul, I started a minyan for beginners who don't know anything. We had 200 people. 200. On Rosh Hashanah, and Yetz Hashem for Yom Kippur we'll have also. And the Shabbos, we started the first regular Shabbos, we had about 50 people.
Last Shabbos.
Past Shabbos. People without any background to start learning a little bit about Yiddishkeit. And I'd like the Rebbe's bracha that we should continue.
And I expected a big yasher koach from the Rebbe. I expected the Rebbe to give me a high five and to congratulate me and so forth. When I said the words Jews without any Jewish background, the Rebbe's smile disappeared. And he looked at me with his piercing blue eyes, and I knew that I had said something very, very wrong. And I didn't know what.
He'll explain to all these people they have a real background of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yankee. And so the Rivki Lochel Leah. That's for you, and that's for the people who have no background.
The Rebbe was saying, this is royalty you're talking about. These aren't Jews without any background. This is royalty. And that was the Rebbe. For every Jew, for the Rebbe was royalty.
Dem Mieden, was ruft sich an der Weile, Beshem Ache, is a sichere Sache, a sechet von Eretz Chefetz, a sichere Sache, a Baljidach mimenu nieder, a sichere Sache, a verbunden mit Mekel, Mayim Chaim, a Vayelikim Chaim, mit darf sich mehr nicht haben Geduld und nicht jallen in Tirche wie Gie, bis zum Messias Nefesh, Kipschuto auf der groben Sache und aufgroben dem bejehrt, bis waren es im Stürmen, dem Mayim Chaim Shebetecha, aber das gewähnt der Wede von den Baal HaYilul.
The Nigun, Hasidic melody, plays a central role in Jewish life. It is the soundtrack of the Hasidic experience. A Farbrengen is interspersed with Nigunim, some reaching deep inside, stirring the strings of the soul. Others soaring high, uplifting and energizing. A Farbrengen was and is today a time for meditation and reflection. The first of 13 Nigunim taught by the Rebbe, set to the words of King David, speaks of the soul's intrinsic thirst for connection with God. no matter its present state.
He quoted there the Baal Shem Tov's insight. The verse says, "Atem tiyuli eretz chayfetz," where God says, it's in, I don't remember where it is in the prophets, "You shall be to me as a desirable land." In other words, it's using the metaphor of a nice good orchard or a field with good produce. The Baal Shem Tov interpreted it deeper, and that's what he said here in this piece, like a piece of land. Like a piece of land, you dig deep, that's where you're going to find the precious minerals, gold, diamonds, whatever. But sometimes you got to dig deep and sometimes you got to clean it up. And that's what he was telling George Rohr, and he's telling that fellow from Australia. It was as if he took it personally. How can you say that here's a Jew without a background, or a Jew that has no connection to Judaism? Every Lubavitch Chassid hears that. I spoke to somebody today. It was on another matter, and she said to me, "My brother, but he's been he's been already out of the fold for many, many years already." There was no time to give her a whole share on this. What do you mean out of the fold? It doesn't exist such a thing, we were taught. There's no such thing as out of the fold. As the Rebbe said, they're all Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, all the sons and daughters of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. And it's offensive to hear that someone is out of the fold. These words, it's the wrong wordage. It's a beautiful story that happened with the previous Rebbe in the early 1940s. There was a chassid of the previous Rebbe, his name was Rabbi Jacobson. And the previous Rebbe sent him around. He would open up schools and fundraise at the same time. And this Rabbi Jacobson arrived in Chicago. It wasn't then an hour's flight. Then it was probably an overnight train. And he arrived in Chicago and he met a donor, a very rich man. And the donor says to him, you're different than the other Mishulachim who come. I've had people come, before the war, people came from Europe, would come to America, and they come to collect money. But I see you have a different mission. You're more than just here to collect money. You're putting on tefillin with people. You're doing all sorts of stuff. So what's going on? So Rabbi Jacobson said to him that in the Haim, there used to be a traveling scribe, a sofer. Today, if you have to check your tefillin and mezuzahs, you take it to the sofer in Manchester or wherever it may be. But back in the day, the scribes would travel from town to town and village to village, and they would check the people, the sefer Torahs, the tefillin, the mezuzahs. So he says, if one of the letters in a sefer Torah is broken, then the whole sefer Torah is puzzle, as we know. So he says, the big scribe, he's in New York. He says, that's the Rebbe. And he sends us, the little scribes, and we go around to all the towns and villages all over, and we find Jews, the broken Jews, and we're there to fix them and to help them. The philanthropist was very, he enjoyed that analogy, and he gave a larger donation. And Rabbi Jacobson felt very good about himself. And he came back to New York, and he went upstairs in 770 to the second floor, which was the apartment where the previous Rebbe lived, if you're familiar with the picture of that building. And he was very proud of himself, and he told the previous Rebbe this story and what the question was and how he answered. And similar to what happened here with George Rohr, he sees the previous Rebbe's face also wasn't very happy. And the previous Rebbe says to him, you got it all wrong. So what did I get wrong? He says, yes, the Jewish people are compared to a Sefer Torah. And yes, every Jew is a letter in the Sefer Torah. But not letters of ink written on parchment, but rather letters that are engraved in stone. There's no such thing as a broken Jew, and we are not going to fix them, because they're not broken. A letter that's engraved in stone, at worst, it's covered in dirt. And our job is to come and remove the dirt and reveal the innate Jew that's there, the essence. So we're not fixing anybody because nobody's broken. We have to change that attitude. And that's exactly what the Rebbe was telling us over here in this piece. There's no such thing as people without a background. There's no such thing as people who have nothing to do with Judaism. There's no such thing as someone told me today, as I said earlier, who've left the fold. At most, it's people who have not been educated and have not been taught in the ways of Yiddishkeit and have been covered over with some of the rubbish of the world. So we need to come with a very strong leaf blower and blow away the leaves and blow away the dust and blow away the dirt. And then what you will see is, as in that parable of the Baal Shem Tov, if you dig deep, you will find not just something nice, you'll find diamonds, which is a unique and an interesting thing about diamonds. They don't grow on trees. You have to dig through the dirt to find the diamonds. And even when you find it, it's in a very rough form in rocks, and you got to break apart the rocks. And then you got to find the diamond and polish the diamond and cut the diamond and shape the diamond. But one thing is very important, and that is what is able to cut and polish and shine and shape a diamond? Only another diamond. One diamond can shape another diamond. One Jew is able to help the other Jew. It's not God that's going to do it, the Rebbe says, it's us. And that's what we said at the beginning. The Rebbe's leadership powers was that to create us into leaders so that we should then become the diamond to polish another Jew as well. She mentioned at the beginning, one of the interviewees said that, she mentioned in brief, but the story she was referring to was that there was an elderly woman who was online one of those Sundays for dollars, and she comes up to the Rebbe, and she's been waiting for a few hours, and she's exhausted, and the Rebbe was then in his late 80s, and she says to him, Rebbe, we look probably the same age. I'm exhausted. How do you stand on your feet for so long? And the Rebbe said to her, yes, you guessed it. When you're counting diamonds, you don't get tired. Every Jew is a diamond. Every neshama is a diamond. But yes, sometimes it's covered with a bit of schmutz, a bit of dust and dirt. So it's up to us to be able to reveal that. And when we dig deep, we will find it and succeed in revealing that beauty.
Rabbi Kevin, just
yes.
Can I ask a question? Did the Rebbe give practical advice how to polish our own diamonds and how to polish another diamond, how to do it?
Till now we saw the Rebbe telling us how to find the diamond.
Oh.
We got to dig. Sometimes you got to dig deep. Sometimes it's very deep, but we
So I'm
must
saying-
never give up.
So
Did he give?
I've got
Did
a
he give?
question.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, ask a question. Yeah.
No, you carry on. You were talking.
No, I just wanted to know, did he teach us how to dig? And what's the tools that we need to use?
The tools to dig, the Rebbe said, is, as at the beginning, the theme is Avas Yisrael. Not just to have Avas Yisrael because it's a mitzvah of the Torah, there's a mitzvah to eat matzah, and there's a mitzvah to put on tefillin, and to have a mezuzah, there's a mitzvah to love another person. No, love the other person because you actually do love him. Recognize that he is your brother and your sister.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Would you have worked for Heinrich Heine and Karl Marx?
Say that again?
Would it have worked for Heinrich Heine and Karl Marx?
The diamond could be covered in a lot of dirt by one's own decisions or by the decisions of the environment. He was born to a Jewish mother. He had the diamond. He had the diamond and had a neshama. And given the proper circumstances, it would have worked for him too. Yes.
But my
A
question
Jew is not born by accident. God doesn't give out his neshamas by accident. So if someone was born a Jew, that means God put the neshama there and the potential is there. Yes.
So my question is, how far would the Rebbe go? So as Ian's citing the example, Karl Marx, who said, I don't believe in religion, how far, taking the hypothetical situation that he could have met Karl Marx, how far would the Rebbe have gone to try and point out that he was a Jewish diamond? Or would he have gone that far?
I'll answer you with two stories because the best answer to the question is, instead of a philosophy, is the actual stories. One of them is on video and one isn't. The video you'll be able to search on YouTube and you'll find it. This fellow came to the Rebbe. I'll find it. I'll forward it to you. And he says he's a Catholic. And he says he believes in JC, and he brought books to the Rebbe to share it with him, to spread the message. And you see the sensitivity. You watch it. It was a 3-4 minute encounter. The sensitivity with which the Rebbe spoke with him and dealt with him. And at the end, he says, yes, I'm a Jew. I always was a Jew, and I will die as a Jew, he says.
Yeah, but that guy approached the Rebbe, I guess is what you're saying. But would the Rebbe have gone out to a character like Karl Marx, had it been possible, and tried to sort of bring him back to being a diamond?
That's what the Rebbe had his shluchim for, and he did send. Sometimes there were stories of where he sent people to individuals who needed special care. I mean, I have so many stories coming in my head, but I promise you a different one first. There was I think I said it to you once. There was then remind me to come back to this one. There was an Israeli Supreme Court judge who was vehemently anti-religious. I think his name was Chaim Cohen in the late 1960s. And he was in New York one September, and he was in Manhattan, and whatever it was, I don't know why he was there. And he says to his friend, what are we doing tonight? Are we going out? His friend says, tonight, I'm going to Crown Heights. I'm going to the Lubavitch Rebbe, because tonight is Simchas Torah. And in Israel, it's no longer the Chag. So the Israeli consulate would come to the Rebbe by Hakofis on Simchas Torah at night. So he says, you're not religious. Why would you go there? So he says, because it's a very special chavaya. It's a special experience. Come along with. You won't regret it. Apparently, I don't know, but I heard for Chaim Cohen to go into a shul on Simchas Torah to a Hasidic Rebbe was unreal. Wouldn't happen. Anyway, long story short, he came with a delegation. Now, Hakafis started at 1 a.m. in the morning because there was a Farbrengen starting at 9 till about 12:30. And then there was a short break, and Hakafis was at 1 in the morning. And then when the Israeli delegation would come, I remember Bibi Netanyahu, I was a teenager, a kid, Ariel Sharon came, and they would spend time with the Rebbe, and 5,000-6,000 Chassidim squashed in the room, and they're taking their time, half an hour, 45 minutes. He came, and they had a chat with the Rebbe before Hakafis, and then they started the Hakafis. And one of the Hakafis, the Rebbe shouted across to the Gabbai, to the warden. He says, give a Hakafah to the guest from Israel. And everybody looked, and this Chaim Cohen never. So they gave him, so the fellow takes out a Sefer Torah. And someone says, no, don't give him that. It's a heavy Sefer Torah. Now, a heavy Sefer Torah in Yiddish means his Ashvere Torah. So he didn't want to give it to him. So the Rebbe says, give him the Torah. Torah is not shver. Shver can also mean hard. Torah is not hard. Every Jew has a portion in the Torah. Give it to him. And Chaim Cohen took the Torah and he danced the Torah that night, Simchas Torah. You know what happened in Israel the next day or 2 days later? The headlines in the secular papers were, how can it be that Chaim Cohen, he's not really that secularist that we always thought he was. He went to HaKofis and danced with the Sefer Torah of the Lubavitch Rebbe. The headlines in the religious papers were, how dare the Lubavitch Rebbe give attention and love to Chaim Cohen, who's so anti-religion and he's the bane of our existence in Israel. So the Rebbe ended up, both sides weren't happy with him, which is fine.
I too have been to 770 synagogue on Simchas Torah, but I got no headlines.
So how, if it was Karl Marx or if it was Chaim Cohen, whoever it was, it didn't really make a difference. There is one story which I want to tell you, which involves, involves a bit of a miracle, a bit of prophecy even. My father used to tell us the story when we were kids, and then he met the person with whom it happened to in 1982 when he went with him into Lebanon with the Lubavitch mitzvah tanks to encourage, to give chizuk, to give energy to the soldiers who were there during the war. This story happened in 1958. There was a Jew living in Kfar Chabad. His name was David Lesselbaum. And David Lesselbaum had a cousin whose name was, I forgot his first name. His last name was Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel was a very, very intelligent man, but a heretic. And not just a heretic, he was an active atheist who despised religion. This David Lesselbaum gets a letter in the post in 1958, in the month of Tevis, if I remember correctly. And the Rebbe says to him, I want to send you on a mission. I have a shlichus for you. I want you to go to your distant cousin, David Lesselbaum. And the Rebbe says to him, I want you to give him the following message. And you can say it in my name. And if he asks, you can show him this letter. The Rebbe says, the letter is printed today. I know that recently, you have been having doubts about your lifestyle and about your perspectives and outlooks. And the time has come to come back. Ula ois, ula meifes, as a sign that that I know what I'm talking about, the Rebbe writes, ula ois, ula meifes, yeh hacholem hasamuch lezeh, as a sign that you, the visitor who's delivering the message, is real, will be the dream that he will have near your meeting with him. I've never seen the Rebbe should write something like that. The Rebbe writes it in a letter, the dream that he's going to have. Now, David Lesselbaum was frightened to go because he was renowned and he'd throw him out and humiliate him, and he didn't go. He was too scared. He kept pushing it off. His daughter got sick, and it was deteriorating. And he spoke to some friends, and his friends said to him, what are you playing with fire here? It's your daughter's life. Go and fulfill what the Rebbe asked you to do. In the month of Adar, he took a deep breath and he went to this Zerubbabel. He says, the first miracle that happened was that he didn't throw me out of his house. He sat there patiently, which he'd never, ever done. This is a fellow who one time, there was a Yid in Eretz Yisrael, his name was Chaim Hersh Cohen. He has a son who's a Rosh Yeshiva in Manchester. And Zerubbabel, if you look it up online, he had a big, long white beard. He looked like a sage. He looked like a Rov. And Cohen saw him without a yarmulke. So he comes up to him, he says, Reb Yid, your yarmulke fell off. A Yid going a beard like that. He opened his mouth to him. He got off. He ran away. He couldn't. He was so violent in his talk, but he went with a big white beard. So he says, David Lesselbaum says the first miracle was he didn't throw me out of the house. The second thing was, he says, he listened out every word I said. He didn't ask me for the letter. He listened every word I said. He said, thank you very much. And that was that. The next letter printed in the letters from the month of Adar, the Rebbe writes to David Lesselbaum, thank you very much for doing what you've done. And the Rebbe writes, you fulfilled your shlichus Va'ani es shlichuti, and I fulfilled my shlichus. Very unusual words here. You fulfilled your mission and I fulfilled mine, and that's it. Leave it. The Rebbe signs the letter. P.S. A blessing for a speedy recovery for your daughter. Now, you want to know what happened with this Zerubbabel? Okay, so two things I can tell you about. He didn't become a Haredi Jew, no. But one thing that did happen was he stopped his writings. He used to write in the papers and in the academic journals. He stopped all his anti-Jewish writings, anti-religious writings completely. That ended. In the early 70s, and this was in the papers, he visited Russia. And he went into the Moscow shul. And they gave him an aliyah, probably the first aliyah he had in his life. And he tells in the interview, and this caused a commotion in Israel, he tells in the interview that when he went up to the Aliyah and he saw the Sefer Torah, suddenly the letters of the Torah started dancing all around because of all the tears that were in his eyes. And this caused again an uproar because he was a leading intellectualite. He was getting emotional with the Sefer Torah. Zerubbabel is getting emotional. What's going to happen? What's happened to the world? What's happened to our good atheists? So to answer your question, Rabbi Chaim and Dave, yes, the way their approach, what's the expression? The man to a man's heart is through his stomach. The approach to a Jew's soul is through his or her attention, patience, love, and care, because, as he just said, they're royalty. And you treat royalty special. That's how it's done. That's what happens. And the Rebbe did that himself. He didn't, as we said earlier, he didn't just preach it, but he actually did it as well. Let's go on now. 1 second. We'll say L'chaim, and we'll go on to the next segment. There's 3 segments to this. L'chaim.
L'chaim, L'chaim.
Let's move on. Okay, 1 second. Ooh. Must be an easier way, but I don't know it. Share. Here we go. Okay, you can see it all, yeah? Here we go.
By seeing the essence of the Jewish soul, the Rebbe showed what we are capable of. He encouraged people to see themselves and others from God's perspective, how even the most minute action is significant and impactful. Rabbi Fishel Jacobs is a rabbi, author, and expert on the laws of family purity. After a successful career in professional karate, he reconnected to his Jewish roots and had an audience with the Rebbe in 1981.
As I walked in, I didn't think, I did it out of naivety. I took a tape recorder and I put it in my mother's pocketbook. I didn't ask, I just assumed it was okay because I knew it was an important thing. So I actually tape recorded the entire thing.
God Almighty bless every one of you and all the members of the family, and all things necessary, spiritually and materially, and especially to have much nachas, much pleasure from every one of the children in all aspects.
At this point, the Rebbe introduced another subject which I really had no idea that was going to come up, and it was out of the blue. That was extremely difficult because my academic side hadn't expanded very much. I'm in Shir Aleph, which means I'm still in the first class. He said, I'd like to give you, it's a custom amongst Jews to give money for charity. Before, on your way back, you give this in Eretz Yisrael to charity. Your parents give this dollar, and then he sent. Then that was the end of the yichud. So we got up, and that was the end of it. This is where the hard part comes in. The smicha was really difficult. It was really a nightmare. That took about 2 years. At that point, my confidence had gotten up a little bit, and I said, wait a minute, it's possible. You can do it. I wrote into the Rebbe, and by now I'm 27 years old. And I said to the Rebbe, well, the Rebbe told me to do smicha. would the Rebbe give me his blessings to do the head smicha of the head rabbinate of Israel. And the Rebbe wrote back that same day, I got an answer from Rabbi Grant, the Rebbe says, yes, do that. And from that smicha, thank God, I was able to publish, my first book was Chachmat Tahara, while I was in Kollel. It's a commentary on Shulchan Aruch. I published my most famous book, which is Family Purity. I had 7 printings of that book till now. We had a Chabad house at Tel Aviv University, and I was a rabbi in the Israeli prison service. I wrote a book about that. But who thought? People were dismissing me as an ex-athlete. No one saw that in me. No one saw that I could learn smicha. But he gave me that belief, and he gave me that power.
Gesagt beloschen a Gemara, als ein Mensch kann öftern in der ganzen Welt, Chayiv Odom Leimer Bishvili Nivre Hoilom, bis wannet, wie die Gemara sagt in Sanhedrin, wie der Monsche mehrere Mol, Alloma Nivre Hoilom Yechidi, aber der Mensch hat beschaffen, der Ewigster hat beschaffen die Menschen, hat ihn beschaffen, nicht wie andere Minen. Als sie gewähren ein paar oder mehrere Suche ist, der Mensch ist beschaffen geworden, ein Yechidi, ein 99er oder Marische. Und wie verrennt wird das, hat der Ewigster hat dämmelt, gleich in dem Onnips vom Beschaff gemacht, ein Unterschied. Dem soll wissen sein, jeder Mensch bechol Mokim und bechol Zman, a jeder Mensch ist ein Neuler Molle. Punkt, als wie in jende beschade Mächten Reger von beschaffenden Menschen. Sie werden 91er Mensch und hat in sich Kehlel gewähnt. Alle Deres, ad seif kol Deres, als darf sich betrachten, jeder Mensch, beseif kol Deres in Zman HaGolus, wo soll sich nicht gefinnen, als ist ein Neuler Molle, wo das ist ein Ausdruck von Teras Emes, Bediuk, an nichts nur Stamm, ist eine Welt, ist ein Neuler Molle, eine Welt, was ist ungefüllt, mit allen Sachen, was sie darf sein in der Welt, als sie fällt dort gar nicht Chosser. Es werden nicht mit dem gegeben, die Pchire. Soll das herausbringen, Mina Keach und Mina Helen, El Hapeil, Vel Hagilui.
In the early 1970s, Diane Abrams practiced law in New York and taught the nation's first Women and the Law course at NYU. Her husband, Robert Abrams, served as New York State Attorney General.
I wrote a memoir of my grandmother. I think it was published in the early 70s. The reason I came to write this article about her was because I became involved in the early days of the women's movement, the feminist movement and I taught the first Women in the Law course in 1969 at NYU Law School. At the time, there seemed to be a criticism of certain aspects of the Jewish religion in terms of its approach to women. And I remembered my grandmother very clearly, we're very close, as a very traditional Jewish woman in terms of her religious observance, but yet she was so highly respected, and she had such a respected place in the family and the community. So I didn't feel that it was a conflict for women to take their particular mitzvot seriously and have their particular role within Judaism and yet have an equal role in the society. So I was trying to explain what some saw as a contradiction. You know, in our meetings, the Rebbe, I see what sometimes colleagues say, well, how is your writing coming along? You're writing more, because he loved the article. He said, this has to be a book. And that day, that was actually a few days after the Crown Heights riots, and my husband and I came to meet with some of the leaders of the community to see what could be done. And I thought I was just going along for him to talk to my husband. And I was very shocked when he said to me, how is that book? How is the writing? How is it coming along?
Double portion of the addiction.
Thank you. Thank you.
Double portion for you also.
We met.
Promised me till time that God to write a book of memoirs about you, the gun.
Yes.
What happened to the book?
Well, I'm doing some things in that direction, which I'll inform you as it goes along.
It takes you too long yet.
You're right.
You have much more other things to do after you finish that.
Okay.
May God Almighty bless you. Good news.
You know, I think I must have turned beet red. I don't know if that showed up. It probably didn't show up in the video, but how I felt. So actually, from that day forward, I mean, the man had a very strong influence on people. I sat down for the next year. I did nothing but, try and write about my grandmother. I did a lot of research, and it did lead me into many other fascinating, productive avenues. So that was very helpful. It might not be what people usually think of him as, his influence.
Die Licht von Kirchhoffim, von Stern, was Israel sich nimmt schon die Kirchhoffim. Und was die Kirchhoffim gefunden sich, in einer Merchag Otzu, in einer gar weite Strecke von dem Ort, wo sie gefunden sich der Mensch, was die Sterne. Von deswegen sieht die Lichtigkeit von den Sternen, bis auf sehr viel, als kann bemerken, a Schinui, a Änderung, zieht das a Stern, was finkelt und leicht wird lichtiger oder weniger, und andere Änderungen, oder sehr bei jeder Menschen in seiner Arbeit, wenn tut in dem, mit seinem, wie ein Mensch darf tun, es nutzen die Kabdruf der Kirche ist, wo der Rebischter hat ihm gegeben, wird ein Licht, was beleicht nicht nur ihm allein und sein Mischpoche und sein Stadt, nur die ganze Welt herum, bis in die Himmel Echet, was man kann sich trachten, als ein Mensch sich sehr begrenzt. Ich weiß, es ist sehr wichtig, sie wird tun ja seine Tag, sie wird fühlen sein tagtäglichen Leben und tun die bestimmte Meise, was kann tun in einer bestimmten Regel, in einer Samennefen oder in einer zweiten Nefen. Wissen wir von der Dogma, aber man soll als die, was mei Katnus, aber man soll nicht trachten, dass das eine Kleinigkeit. Und sie kann auf die Mine nicht, wie wird tun. Der Vater darf sich nicht anstrengen, lernen wir davon. Aber das wird ein Licht, jeder einzelne Meise, auf viele Diebe und auf viele Machschower, was kol safe wird sie echt, auf den Diebe und Meise von den Menschen, ist von der höchsten Wichtigkeit für ihn und für die ganze Welt, als ein und einziger Mensch durch ein und einzige Tat, meiste seine, oder Dibur oder Machschowo, kann wirken auf die ganze Welt, wie der Rambam bringt das Aris Klorer, heit in Absag din Halacha.
Perhaps the most famous of the Rebbe's Nigunim has been adopted in many Jewish circles during the special prayers on the major festivals. The words capture one of the most essential Hasidic teachings, the profound love God has for His people.
So we just had another analogy. We used before the analogy of the diamond in the ground. And here the Rebbe uses the analogy of the stars in the sky. That the Jewish people are compared to the Stern, to the stars in the sky, as God told Avraham Avinu. He took him out and he showed him the stars of the sky. And that's what's the comparison, he says, because, and this takes us to the next level. There's what has to be done. We spoke about how has to be done, and now what should be the results? The results should be that the proper yield of the profit, the yield of produce from that field, should be a healthy and proper and successful one. That means the Rebbe showed us how to be able to reveal what we have within us without underselling ourselves. How many of us do undersell ourselves and underestimate that potential that we have as Jews? And here the Rebbe took, whether it was that sports fellow, they didn't have time to go into it here. He was a karate a specialist in karate, and he ended up in Kfar Chabad in yeshiva. And out of the blue, when he's in Shir Aleph, the Rebbe asks him if you're going to do smicha. And today he's written books on halacha, which many refer to in their own lives. That's revealing the potential. The same thing was with Mrs. Abrams. And the same thing is closer to home that we're all familiar with, and that's our own Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Olav Shalom. Also, he was going to be, as he says himself, he was going to Cambridge. Can you imagine if Jonathan Sachs would not have visited the Rebbe in 1968? He'd be somebody with long hair in Cambridge and crooked teeth, a philosopher of some sort, an economist. And no one would have heard of him. And how old was he? 21, I think he said, in 1968, yeah? Or younger, I don't remember. And the Rebbe told him and gave him a direction in life. I mean, you don't get better than that. That's what you achieve when you have the above-mentioned approach that we spoke about until now. You can reveal and in people what they themselves didn't ever dream or imagine that they could have. Everyone remembers they had one teacher who really had faith in them. And that was the year that I did very well in school. We all know that the teachers in the olden days, today it's different, hopefully. But, you know, they used to give a clap, they used to twist your ear, a shmais, a hair, a word, another, you know, a name. But then you had a teacher who cared about you and believed in you and saw that potential. Oh, that was the year that I flourished in school. That's the year when I really did well. So, going back to that first Farbrengen in 1951, the group who were there, as we pointed out earlier, was a small group. It's only a year after the passing of the previous Rebbe. It's only 6 years after the worst catastrophe in Jewish history, 6 million Jews. And the Rebbe comes up with this bold challenge. And he puts the Chassidim up to this bold challenge. Instead of assuaging their pain and, you know, insularness, which many other communities were doing, the Rebbe tells them you're going to find comfort in your action by setting the bar higher and expecting more of yourself and going out there and reaching out to every single Jew. Again, the Rabbi Sachs said that famous line that the Rebbe, he says, Hitler hunted every Jew down with hate. And the Lubavitch Rebbe taught us how to hunt and find every Jew with love. And that is the challenge that he gave his Chassidim then, the young ones and the old ones. A few years later, 53 or 54, the Rebbe started an organization called Tzeirei Agudas Chabad. In English, it's called Lubavitch Youth Organization. The founding members were all over 70. Because age was not a factor to the Rebbe. Age was not a factor. And he said that many times. After he was 70 and after he was 80. He said, age is not a factor.
Same with Biden.
Sorry?
Same with Biden.
Same with Biden. If God gave you the years and the health and the wisdom, that's why there's no word for retirement in the Jewish language. Maybe in modern Hebrew there is, but in Lashon HaKodesh, in Torah, there's no such word as retirement, because a Jew is meant to always be productive. And what's productivity? The impact that we have on others. And this revolutionary nature of the Rebbe, this insistence on placing people first before Torah and mitzvahs even. that Avas Yisrael is the most important thing. We don't just love a Jew who lives the same lifestyle that I live, and if he's Shomer Shabbat, and if he does this, to love a fellow Jew because he is a Jew. End. Beginning and end. Everything else is an added bonus, which is very nice. But to love the Jew because of who that Jew is, and that God and the Torah cannot be complete when people disappoint others and misbehave towards others and so on. Someone messaged me during the video a beautiful story with the previous Rebbe, the one whose Yortzeit is on Shabbos, that there was a Jew, not an observant Jew, who was waiting online for 2 days. He wanted to come into the previous Rebbe, and then the previous Rebbe sent the secretary to come and call him in. He comes in and he says to the previous Rebbe, he says, "Why would you call me in ahead of the line? I'm not religious." And the previous Rebbe said to him, "Religion is between you and God. I'm concerned about your Yiddishkeit. Your Jewishness, that's what Yiddishkeit means. Your Jewishness, you're a Yid. And that's what's most important. How can I help you? What can we do to help each other? What can I do to help you? That's what's important. And that's what God wants. And that was the revolutionary statement that the Rebbe taught on that night, which we asked earlier. What was so revolutionary about it? That was the revolutionary statement. And from that comes that, good leaders create followers, great leaders create other leaders. Another one of Jonathan Sachs's beautiful lines. On every occasion, the Rebbe would end the Farbrengen with Hamaisa Hua Iker. It was the most frequented words out of the Rebbe's lips. Hamaisa Hua Iker. Deed is the main thing. Action is the main thing. When we come out of a Farbrengen, there always has to be a hachlata, there has to be a positive resolution in whatever area of Judaism it is. But most significant and relevant probably for our occasion, celebrating 71 years of the Rebbe's leadership, is probably a resolution, each one of us in our own way, to be able to reach out to many more Jews, not just the shluchim, and not just the rabbis or the chassidim, but every Jew should reach out to other Jews. Especially we're living through a time now where the biggest challenge today isn't faith. The challenge today is that people should remain upbeat, should remain besimcha, which is a fundamental element of Judaism, to remain positive, to be able to have the inner strength, to be able to overcome the challenges that we're facing during this pandemic. And the only way that we can do that is like one diamond can polish another diamond, only one happy Jew can make another Jew happy. So we have to be able to share that with others. And that's, I think, should be our hachlata, our resolution for tonight, to make other Jews happy. How do you make them happy? Bring them to a shir, a Zoom class. Bring them to a l'chaim. Bring them a challah for Shabbos, whether it's a spiritual thing to share with them, or whether it's a material thing to share with them. We all know people, and you know something? I'm not a diamond merchant, but I believe that when one diamond is busy polishing the other diamond, the original diamond gets shinier and polished as well. When you're able to share joy, the simcha of Yiddishkeit with others, then it'll make you besimcha as well. And that answers Rabbi Chaim's question of earlier, how to do it, by doing it. By doing it, that's how you're going to do it. And with that, we will dig deep within ourselves and reveal the diamond that's within me, and reveal the diamond that was within him and her, and ultimately reveal the diamond that is the world, the beauty that there is in this world, and ultimately arrive at that time when Mashiach comes, when all of that beauty will be revealed, and we'll be able to see and benefit and reap the rewards and reap the joy of all of these diamonds. L'chaim.
L'chaim, l'chaim. Rabbi Kiva, just to echo what you mentioned, to me, one of the most powerful messages that the Rebbe taught and I received and I live with is the importance of even one act that I might find or feel so insignificant, it's so small, really is going to make a big difference. So what's the big deal? I'm not going to do it. I'm only doing one small thing. And the Rebbe will always encourage, even the smallest thing, it's going to polish the diamond. It's going to make the biggest difference for myself, for the other person. It's literally going to change the world. That empowerment of just doing one small action is very, very powerful.
And You know, Shimon Peres came in 1972. He visited the Rebbe. And when he came out, they asked him, what were your impressions? He was already then quite an important man in Israel. So he said two things. He says, firstly, we didn't agree on everything. Okay, we had many disagreements, but he's the one with his 2 feet on the ground. He said, Shimon Peres, I'm still in fantasy what I wish would be. He is the realist, number one. He says, number two, he says, gleibt wie a Bobbe. His simple faith is like a Yiddish grandmother. He actually believes everything. What you quoted now, Rabbi Chaim, is a Rambam. The Rambam writes that a person should look at the world as an even scale, and with one little, it's exactly even. So all you got to do is put one little, even if it's a straw, on one end, and the whole scale will tip. Says the Rambam, that's how we have to look at the world. And with every deed that we do, we'll either take it this way or that way. The Rebbe believed that literally, like a Bobbe. And he taught us to believe that literally. Yes, it's not some sort of metaphor and it's nice and philosophical. No, that thing that you did counts and is important, and you never know. That could be the thing that's going to actually tip the scales. And the words of the Rambam, maybe Yeshua v'atzala loy u'lekol ha'olam. It can bring salvation and redemption to the person himself and to the whole world. Yeah, simple belief. The Rambam knew what he was talking about, and he believed it and lived it and taught us how to live it. Not just his Hasidim. This was his message to the whole world.
Avrami, could I ask you yet another question? In the history of Chabad, presumably the Rebbes have been appointed contiguously. Is it unusual to have a hiatus, presumably, that we have now?
So, two parts to the answer. In 1882, the Rebbe Marash, Rabbi Shmuel of Lubavitch, passed away, and they didn't have a Rebbe for 10 years because the older son was a businessman, and he said it's not, he was a chassid, he's not cut out for it, he said. And his younger son was only 21, and it took 10 years till he accepted the mantle of leadership. That was the longest hiatus, as you call it. There has never been, 25, 26 years has never been. But we have a tradition from the times of the Tzemach Tzedek, where the Tzemach Tzedek said, call it a prophecy or not, but it's recorded that the Tzemach Tzedek said that this is written down before the Rebbe passed away. So it's not something that was discovered later.
Who was the Tzemach Tzedek?
Sorry?
Who was the Tzemach Tzedek?
Sorry, yes. The Tzemach Tzedek was the third Rebbe of Lubavitch. His name was, he was the original Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch. And the Tzemach Tzedek said that there will be a time when Chassidim will be without a Rebbe. And then what is going to keep them going? He said it will be the unity that's going to keep them going.
So in the words of Tom Jones, it's not unusual.
Okay, I don't know who Tom Jones is, but I don't know in reference to what he said it. But more than that, I'll tell you something more than that. I'll be honest with you. The Rebbe is physically not here. That's clear, right? But the Rebbe's inspiration and teachings is very much here and relevant and talking to us today. When we learn every Thursday night that we're doing our Rashi, whatever it is, those are the Rebbe's teachings, and they are talking to our day, our current situations as they are today. That's the amazing part. I'm not just talking about that so much of the Rebbe's scholarship is still being published. It hasn't all been published yet. Every week, there's still published a new pamphlet of the Rebbe's teaching, and they're going through it slowly. But studying it, it's not. The Rebbe was speaking to his times, the second half of the 20th century, but the practicalities of it is so relevant and practical to today as well. I mean, I don't know if you remember from last week. At the end of the shir, I read the last 3 paragraphs of the talk that we were speaking about. And over there we were talking about the plague of the mixture of the animals. And those last 3 paragraphs are probably one of the most powerful 3 paragraphs of the whole 39 volumes of the Rebbe's edited work, where he speaks today more than ever, and that was 1972, about the partition, the barrier that has come, that if there's no separation between, if the Jewish people do not see themselves as different, then they will, and we see ourselves as the world wants to tell us that we're all one, assimilate with everyone, then there'll be a barrier between us and God. But if we put a healthy barrier between us and the nations and realize our mission and our purpose, not a barrier of like a racist barrier, a racial barrier, but rather that we have different mission and different purpose, as the Rebbe there said. Then the mechitza between us and our Father in heaven won't be there. That was 1972. 2021, it's so relevant as well. So it's been 26 years, and it's been a very painful 26 years, but we have the blessing of video and tape recordings. We're able to listen and watch, but most importantly, today we're able to learn. None of the Chabad Rebbes produced so much material in Torah learning with so much practical application as the Rebbe did.
Did you personally meet him?
I grew up in Crown Heights.
So you met him?
I grew up with him.
Audiences.
Rabbi Chaim as well. We grew up there. We took it for granted.
Can you share anything with us that he told you?
Meet him. We didn't have chats. It wasn't like that. We would go. I remember having my earliest memory. One of my earliest memories is at 3 years old from my Opshinish. We went into Yechidus to a private. But it's just a picture in my mind. And then again from my bar mitzvah. And then we used to go for dollars, and there were various occasions when we would meet up. But I wouldn't say a word. Not just out of respect, but it was an awesome experience. It was awe-inspiring. So if I'd go to get $1 for my birthday, I would come up and nudge the secretary standing there and say, Yom Huledes, and he would tell the Rebbe it's the birthday, and the Rebbe would give a blessing for my birthday.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but we were there. We saw the Farbrengens every Shabbos, and we saw the Rebbe. We davened with the Rebbe. We were kids. We used to play by his feet during the Farbrengens. So we're very much guilty of taking it for granted. But what was unique as well, what I was saying, was the scholarly output was unique. All the Rebbes gave. Chabad has the greatest collection of mystical writings, 7 generations, which no other branch of Judaism has. Rich Kabbalah and Hasidus and mysticism and insights. But what was unique about the Rebbe, in addition to the volume, which was still flowing to today, it was his stress on the practical. What is the practical lesson we take from even the most abstract the subject you may be learning? There has to be a practical lesson. Why? Because he believes, like a Baba, that the word Torah, as we always say, means instruction. So if it's part of Torah, there must be an instruction there for life, in our lives, in our interaction with others, and he always did that, always, because he very much believed that if it's Torah, it has to have a practical angle.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Feel free. It's open mic. If anyone has, it's a Farbrengen. Say something. Let's hear something from some of our brethren in South Manchester, in the floodlands.
Flood with blessings.
Rains of Gishmi Bracha.
Exactly.
Well, we usually see a video at the end. I'll share with you this week's video, which tells us actually the beginnings of how the cable television recordings, how that all happened.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Let's get this up. Okay, we're gonna share this screen, and then we can carry on as long as you wish. Here we go. Let me make this here like this. Maybe it'll show up now. I can't see anybody when the video goes on. No, still can't. Okay.
America counts on CBS News.
Rumor had it he was now in the building. And so we are
It was 30 years of the Rebbe's Nasias. My father was involved with the media and calling the press and get the Rebbe's message out, etc. And before Farbrengen, he would try to call the local media and the television stations and the New York Times and the newspapers, etc. In this case, the local CBS channel said that they will come to the Farbrengen. There was a big elam there, and it was hard to get in and out of the Farbrengens. But nevertheless, we got this reporter by the name of Lloyd Kramer. We got him into the Farbrengen.
the Lubavitch community, where anniversaries like these are extremely important. So much so that last night's 30th, in New York at least, was
The next day, we recorded a clip. My father mentions to the Rebbe, and if the Rebbe wants, that the Rebbe can view it.
You had to be there. And fortunately, Lloyd Kramer was.
Thank you, Jim. Family.
To our surprise, the Rebbe said yes, that he would like to see it. So we walked into the Rebbe's room with the monitor and the recorder.
For hours he spoke in Yiddish. They listened, and they listened, and they listened. At least one person.
As soon as it finished, I went into the mosquito's office. My father comes in and he says, the Rebbe wants you to come back into his room. The Rebbe asked, hast du mitgetanzt b'shas Maisa? So I went something like with my head and shoulders, yes or no, halfway, and then the Rebbe said, "Stammen ist sicher befreiende Zeit auf Tonnen die Unionen, und b'shas was Tonnen die Unionen soll sie sein mittanzen, und nicht nur mittanzen nach Fei zu sein, sondern mittanzen mit einem Emes." From there, we turned out that we had a new job as far as a new tafkid to be involved with these things.
Was chazichere Sache, jeder Sache, was wird nicht chadisch bei Elam, nicht galle bei Elam. Weil sich ein kol chole stachas Hashemish, nur wenn denn, es mir wart auf das Mann, wenn das wird nicht galle, der Hakel osso Jofa beite, ist auch das chazichere Sache, alle chele reish, ist das zu lieb die Union im Tevim Shibazeh.
How can we get the Rebbe's Hafatzas on Mayonis Chutz? How do you get the Rebbe's message out? I figure the best way you can do it is get it, the Mayan itself, just bring it out to the masses. I'm thinking, there's cable television, there's a satellite. So from the roof of 770, we were able to see the Empire State Building. So we were able to arrange to get access to a window up in the Empire State Building. And then we were able to give them a cable feed, and that cable feed would be able to go out to the uplink in New Jersey.
So they put this huge dish up on the roof of 770, I think 12 foot in diameter or something. And then this truck would pull up, a semi-trailer, full of equipment, and became the office, the control center.
This is Eyewitness News with the Eyewitness News team.
Satellite communication is now used widely, even to broadcast religious services like the one Peter Bannon attended tonight in Brooklyn.
The Rebbe spoke in Yiddish, and they needed somebody to translate for the satellite. So it ended up being my job.
Teichen of the Sichas were very different than the Farbrengens that were in broadcast. The Rebbe usually took the opportunity to talk to the masses. If it was about a moment of silence, or if it was about the Shavim Mitzvahs, the Rebbe would always dedicate a certain amount of time of the Farbrengen to talk to this audience.
To master the earthiness and the worldliness and turn this into a country that is consistent with the motto engraved on its currency, and that is that we not only believe in God, but actually trust in God. We rely on God completely to run the country properly by conducting ourselves in accordance with the 7 Noahide commandments and all the branches.
We would broadcast every big game in the Paga, which basically 6 times a year. The Rebbe always wanted to do. And then usually before the Farbrengen, when we wrote in about the Farbrengen, that we were broadcasting as Farbracha, the Rebbe would send it out every single time. Have a pale mamish with a question mark. So one of the things that we did was, we decided we'd put in telephones. We took a big room upstairs in 784 next door on the 2nd floor. We made a telephone bank of 20 telephones, and then we put up the phone number across the screen. And as soon as we put up the screen, all 20 phones rang at the same time. We had stacks of papers from people that called, gave their names, gave their numbers. I felt this is a way of giving you there a detailed report, showing the people that called, seeing the comments.
The
Schaßen ist Galle geworden eine Möglichkeit. Aber der erste Show, die kommen sich verbinden von einem Ort, bis in Merchake Tevel, bis a viele in Apino Nidachas, a viele Echet in Apino Nidachas in Ruchnis Oinionim, was mit Zadder was Herz sich zu, neise Sibasche Tie, in der Weile, und bei Hashgocha Plotis, hätten der Ruf, den Machschil, durch welchen der Härte, wegen der Linie von a Sefer Teiro.
Joe Papp, the Broadway producer, became very Niskar to the Rebbe through this.
Tuning in one night, late at night, to a cable station, and I came upon, it looked like 2,000 men wearing hats, black hats, and boys, and singing their hearts out, and beautifully singing. Then this extraordinary man with his beard comes on, speaking in Yiddish, and I listened to him, beautifully translated, for 4 hours. I was very much taken by it, and the spiritual exuberance of it was very, very moving, and sort of put me very much back into touch with my roots. I was raised as an Orthodox Jew, but I had not had this kind of an experience.
Good beginning for all good things.
Beautiful beginning. You learned a marvelous lesson by your speech today.
I hope you materialize the lesson in action.
Put it in action. I only believe in action. Thank you.
When we started, I didn't understand the scope of what we were starting, how important it would be to have the videos. But I do believe, when the Rebbe turned to the camera people, that the Rebbe was referring to not just the camera people, and not just to us that were in the control room, but the future generations that would be watching it.
Forget for a moment about you professional Seelachai, it's all around.
This
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Remy, forget about your profession and say L'chaim.
You don't tell that to a taxi driver. Yeah. And that's it. You know, we talk about that the Rebbe believed in everything, believed in the Torah as it is. He referred to it here. The Torah says that everything Hashem created in this world, it's a Mishnah. Everything, it's a Pirkei Avos, I think. Everything Hashem created in this world is in order to reveal the godliness. Some people struggle how you can use a computer and use internet and use satellite television or radio in the 1960s. And along the way, the Rebbe got a lot of flack and criticism when they started a Tanya class on the radio in 1960 or 61, I think it was. How can you use the radio? Radio is the powers of Klippa, the powers of impurity, Tumah. And then the television and now the internet and the Zoom and all these things. The Rebbe taught us, if it exists and it's not forbidden, that means it can and therefore must be used in fulfilling our mission and what we're here for. No debate. So if there's an internet and there's computers or whatever it is, use it. Of course, it can be used for terrible things, but therefore doesn't exclude it from using it for what you need to use it. You would always quote the famous Gemara that says the gold and silver was created only for the purpose, for the beauty of the house of God, for the Beis Hamikdash, but it didn't stop people from using it for idol worship. So because they use it for idol worship, we shouldn't use it for positive things. And so it is with everything. So I'm going to wish you all a good Shabbos, unless it's an open mic. Someone wants to say something.
I remember one of your shares when there was a NASA scientist who met the Rebbe, and I was so impressed with the Rebbe's answer.
Velvel Green.
Mm.
He asked, they were doing research, they were trying to get someone up to Mars.
Yeah.
And he asked, there is an appropriate thing to do to look for life in other planets. Remember?
Yeah, I do remember.
And the Rebbe said, certainly, go for it. Keep searching. The more, why? Remember what he said? Because the more you search and the more you discover, the more we'll realize the greatness of Hashem. But one thing you have to know for sure, the Rebbe says, there's only one Am Yisrael and there's only one Torah. You're not going to find nothing. There's no other. In other words, the mission and the purpose is here. And we are the ones that have to fulfill it. Everything else, go for it.
Sure.
Discover a way. Ian Goldrain. Okay, your camera's off and a thumbs up. Have a good Shabbos. I guess you're leaving.
Right. Thank you, Rabbi Kievman, and thank you for allowing us to join, to bridge the communities from Liverpool, South Manchester here. And blessings to everyone for much success in all that we do. And let's do it with a big smile, happy hearts. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim, thank you very much. Thank you. L'chaim.
Shabbos. Shabbos is Yud Shvat. So say l'chaim on Shabbos and share the inspiration with your families.
L'chaim, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Have a good Shabbos. Good to see you all.
And you. Thank you.
Thank you, Avrami.
Thank you.